Number 4 says, find the inverse of the matrix by hand using row operations. So there's a process for figuring out the inverse of a matrix. And so like 1 through 3, we were trying to prove that they were inverses. We were given two matrices and asked if they were inverses. Here, we're given one matrix and asked to find what is the inverse. So the process for doing this is I want to actually put a copy of the matrix on the left here, and then put a copy of the identity matrix, so the 2 by 2 identity matrix, on the right. And then I want to use row operations to transition the identity matrix over here. So I'm going to try and get the identity matrix on the left, and then whatever's left over here is going to be my inverse matrix. And my operations are kind of like a U. So I want to try and get the identity matrix, and it's going to be kind of like a U. And that'll make a little bit more sense when I show what we're doing here. So my first thing is I want to get a 1 in this location. So in order to do that, I'm going to take 1/4 times row 1 to be the new row 1. So this is very similar to our row operations on the previous couple sections. So that's going to get you 1 5/4, 1/4. So you do multiply the entire row by that 1/4 and 0, and then the second one stays the same. Next, I want to get a 0 here. So again, it's kind of like this U shape. You're doing the upper left-hand corner is 1, then the lower left-hand corner is a 0. So I want to get this 2 to be a 0. So in order to do that, I need to do row 2 plus -2 times row 1 in order to get the new row 2. Okay, so that's going to be a 2, 3, 0, 1, -2, -5/2, -1/2, and 0. And if I add these up, I can use the calculator if I want to add the fractions. So if you hate fractions, you can always use the calculator. But you should get 0, 1/2, -1/2, and 1. And that's going to be the new row 2. So let me go to the next slide here. Okay. Okay, so I have a 1 and a 0, so now I want to get a 1 here. So I can do that by multiplying 2 times row 2 to be the new row 2. So row 1 is going to stay the same. Row 2 is going to be that. So I have a 1 here, a 0 here, and a 1 here. So the last thing I need to do is get a 0 in this location. So what I want to do is I want to take row 1 and add a -5/4 times row 2. So that's going to be 1 5/4, 1/4, 0, 0, negative 5/4, 5/4, negative 5/2. Add these up, and I get 1, 0, 3/2, and negative 5/2. So if I copy that here, this will be 1, 0, 0, 1, 3/2, negative 5/2, negative 1, and 2. Okay, so we're almost done. You'll see that we now have the identity matrix on the left. So whatever I have left over on the right, that is going to be my inverse matrix. So let me declare that as my final answer. So 3/2, negative 5/2, negative 1, and 2. These are the entries for my inverse matrix.